Now, the Catholics canonized the Jewish Bible, which they call the Old Testament, and the New Testament, and they also canonized the apocryphal literature, which the Jews did not canonize. In other words, when the Talmud discusses which are the holy books of the Bible, the discussion is in the Talmud, Baba Batra, page 14. They discuss the whole question of which books are holy. The books which are holy are discussed there. Now, they discuss other books. They say the Proverbs of Ben Sira. Are they holy? Aren't they holy? The debate back and forth. They're very nice. They're kosher. They're not holy. Why? Because Ben Sira lived too close to their time. It's as if they said, well, you know, after the prophets. Why is the book of Maccabees not holy? They said the book of Maccabees is not holy. The reason is that the Maccabees were great heroes, but their grandchildren were not. They were pretty nasty. So you see, they decided, well, we don't want to make these books holy. So there's a whole list of books mentioned in the Talmud, which were Jewish books and biblical in form, but they said these are not sacred books. And therefore, the Jews didn't save them and they didn't copy them. We don't have the original Hebrew texts. But the Christians accepted them. They accepted Maccabees. They accepted Ben Sira. They accepted the Wisdom of Solomon. They accepted a lot of other books. And they became holy according to the Catholic Church. The Protestants returned to the Jewish view. So in the Protestant Bibles, they have the Old Testament and the New Testament, no Apocrypha. Catholic Bibles, they have Old Testament, Apocrypha, New Testament. So the canonization, meaning these books are holy, that was done by the New Testament around 150, before the year 200, because that's already stated. The Jewish canonization, you know, the Jews wouldn't have gone through this whole process of what is holy. They were just reading their literature, but since the Christians said, these books are holy and the New Testament is holy, and the rabbi said, well, we've got to do something about it. So that's when they discussed which books are holy, and they rejected the New Testament, of course, and the Apocrypha. We sort of canonized, that is said, these books are holy around the year 90, when the Christians were already propagandizing. 20 years after the destruction of the temple, it was done. Now what happened after the church was established as the official religion of the Roman Empire? Then we have the Roman Empire becoming officially Christian, and then the Roman Constitution becomes officially Christian. Roman Constitution, of course, is a very ancient legal system, extending back centuries. And now the Roman Constitution is revised, and to it are added certain amendments and sections. The Roman Constitution of the year 425, it has the Roman law, and then to it were added books. Each section is called a book. One book is called religion, and they define religion. And they define religion as Roman Catholic religion, and say, in effect, only those citizens of the Roman Empire shall have the rights. All rights shall be those who are in communion with the Roman Catholic Church, the doctrine of the Trinity, as preached by St. Peter, and the whole thing is laid down. Then there's a section called heresy. Now, what are the heresies? Heresies are religious beliefs by Christians who claim they are Christian but are not Catholic. It's a very big section. They name and define. They name about 45 different Christian movements, and they say these are heretics. And the heretics shall be doubly punished. They'll be punished by God, condemned to eternal damnation, because they don't believe in Catholic Christianity. And they are criminals in the eyes of the state, and shall be wiped off the face of the earth. Now you know what happened to them. In the course of time, non-Catholic Christians were systematically eradicated. They were killed out. And in one particular case, where there was a very flourishing non-Catholic Christian community in southern France, all the armies of the Christian kings, commanded by Pope Innocent III, marched against these Albigensian Christians and made a war and thoroughly destroyed them, every man, woman, and child. These were Christians who were not Catholics. And a guy by the name of Dominic, Saint Dominic preached a crusade against these people and urged the Pope, and in fact he commanded the Pope that he's got to wipe them out. Pope Innocent III in the year 1200. He was the most powerful pope in history. He could command the armies of Europe, and he told them, go after them. In the Roman Constitution, there is a section on Jews and Samaritans, and Caelicolis is a very interesting term. Jews, we know who the Jews are. Samaritans are Israelites who are not Jews. And the split between the Samaritans and the Jews is recorded in the book of Ezra. They already split at the time that the second temple was being built. In any event, the Samaritans built their own temple on Mount Gerizim, which is in the north near the city of Nablus, near Shechem. The Jews built the temple in Jerusalem. The Samaritans are Israelites. They follow the Torah, but they don't accept anything which is past the book of Joshua or Judges. So they have the Torah. They've existed down to the present day. Of course, there are not many of them. There are about 1,000 of them. One time they were much larger. At the present time, there are about 500 living in Nablus, and then another 500 living in Israel, south of Tel Aviv, in a place called Holon. These are Israelites, but they're not Jews. And they have existed side by side in the land of Israel for over 2,500 years. In the Roman times, the Samaritans were a significant nation. So when the Roman Constitution becomes Christian and defines the role of the various religions, Roman Catholic Christianity is the only legitimate religion. Christians who are not Roman Catholics are criminals. When it comes to Jews and Israelites, they are legitimate. Judaism is legitimate as a religion. But of course, it is a religion in an inferior position. So, Jews and Samaritans, and who are these Caelicolis? So that's a very interesting thing. The word Caelicoli means heaven worshippers. What does that mean? Well, we know from the Talmud that there were pagans, Romans, and Greeks who admired Judaism. And they wanted to do things which the Jews did. They wanted to observe the Sabbath. They liked that idea, a day of rest. They didn't convert to Judaism, but they became, in effect, followers of a kind of Judaism, accepting certain moral laws of the Torah, observing the Sabbath day, maybe eating kosher food. They were followers of elements of Judaism, but not converts. And they were recognized, the Talmud calls them Yirei Shamayim, those who fear heaven, worship God, fear heaven. And that's why the Romans called them Caelicolis. They are heaven worshippers. But they were close to the Jews, so the Romans include them in the same book. Jews, Samaritans, and Caelicolis. But what about these laws? Well, the laws on the Jews and the Samaritans, the Israelites, and those who follow them, these laws indicate that Judaism is recognized as a religion, but Jews are inferior to Christians. They're inferior in many ways. For instance, synagogues must be inferior buildings. The other thing is that if a Jew converted to Christianity, he was protected by the state. The Jews couldn't do anything against him. If a Christian converted to Judaism, his property was confiscated. But other things are interesting. For instance, it said, if anyone insults the illustrious patriarch of the Jews, patriarch of the Jews means the head of the Jewish community. Archisynagogos is a Greek name meaning head of the synagogue. These are the terms that they use. If anyone insults the illustrious patriarchs of the Jews, he shall be severely punished. These people must be respected. Jewish clergy have the same privileges and exemptions as Christian clergy. A Jew cannot be summoned to any public duty or to court on a Sabbath day or a Jewish holiday. In other words, they're saying, respect the Jewish holidays, respect the Sabbaths, respect the Jewish religious authorities. On the other hand, you can see that there is an anti-Jewish slant to the Constitution. There are many elements that go into the whole structure of what it is that made the pagans hostile to the Jews, and then why Christianity intensified this hostility. What is interesting is that the church still maintains that it is the duty of the church to protect the Jewish people. Now, this comes out of, well, there are elements in Christian theology, but especially from Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine is one of the great pillars of the Christian church, and he lived around the year 400. And I believe that Saint Augustine's ideas were incorporated into the Constitution. Saint Augustine speaks of the Jews as God's chosen people, just as St. Paul does. And he says, remember, Jesus Christ was a Jew when he was born, and the blood that flowed in his veins was the blood of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people are those who receive the revelation from God. They are the ones who got the Old Testament. They're the only ones who know the language of the Old Testament. If necessary, they will tell us what it means. In other words, we are so important to the foundations of Christianity. Then he says something very interesting. He says the Jews are the witnesses to history. They are the witness people of history. They were there. They received the Torah on Mount Sinai. They were there at the time of Jesus lived. He lived in the land of Israel. He spoke Hebrew. It's as if to say the Jews are the ones who can testify to the truth of Christian history. And then he says, and the Jewish people must be protected. They are our responsibility. We are those who must protect the Jewish people. However, since the Jewish people rejected salvation through Christ and they don't accept the New Testament, and therefore they are being punished by God, and they will never be removed from this inferior position. And then a few other interesting things. The scepter of power has fallen from the hand of Israel and will never be restored. The Jews will never again rule. They will never be in positions of political power. They will never rule over the Holy Land. They will never rule over the city of Jerusalem. You know, once they made these statements and they become fixed in Christian theology and they become accepted, and they were accepted for 1,500 years, then they become, you could say in a sense, embarrassments or indigestion for Christian theology when these things are overturned. And the Jews do assume positions of power, and they do rule, and they do take control of the land of Israel, and they do rule over the city of Jerusalem. All of this is today a real problem to many Christian theologians, and let them grapple with it. What I've explained is Christian theology on the Jews and St. Augustine's ideas. These are theological. I mean, this has nothing to do with the Jews as a factor in the Roman Empire and its prosperity.